Ukraine claims it's starting to crack some of the Russian defenses in its counteroffensive in the south. Kyiv says its forces have broken through the first defensive line in some places, and they're now facing the intermediate one. While that's happening as diplomats are gathering in Saudi Arabia for Friday's international summit on Ukraine's peace plan. Kyiv says its goal is to line up more support for a plan proposed by President Zelensky last year. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian security source is confirming responsibility for the second back-to-back sea drone attack on Russian vessels. The source says Ukraine hit an oil tanker near the strategic Kerch Strait on Friday while it was transporting fuel for Russian troops. Hours earlier on Friday, a different drone hit and damaged another Russian vessel, a warship. As Nick Payton-Walsh reports, CNN has obtained a video of that strike.
The footage is grainy and dark. Then the target comes into view. Russia's Olenegorski Gornyak amphibious assault ship. An unmanned attack drone approaches its target. 450 kilograms of TNT detonates, and the feed cuts out. Russia claimed to have repelled this attack, but the video tells a different story. Ukraine's counter-offensive has in recent weeks reached further and further behind the front lines, forcing the Russian military to spread its sea and air defences. Hundreds of miles from Ukrainian-controlled territory, this was meant to be a safe anchorage, no longer. It used to be safe here, says one prominent military blogger, but Kiev's arm has grown longer. The rear no longer exists, he says.
The fact that such unfortunate incidents occur one after another will certainly be something for them to talk about today. For the political leadership of the Russo-fascist regime, this is, of course, a serious slap in the face.
All the same, Russia maintains the image of being in control. It says Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu visited troops in occupied Ukraine. The map they both point to, so much worse for Moscow than ever imagined when they invaded nearly 18 months ago. The attacks on the Kremlin in Moscow, its expensive suburbs, the glass towers of Moscow City, all an example of Ukraine's further reach. But really, this naval port on the Black Sea, Novorossiysk, hundreds of miles potentially Ukraine will have to have sent a drone to have got there. And it is a startling sign, I think, of the ingenuity Kiev are using to attack parts of Russia's military establishment they must have thought, frankly, were far from Kiev's reach just a matter of weeks ago.
Ukraine says its air defenses fought off a Russian attack overnight. Kyiv says Russia launched 2 waves of strikes, one Saturday night and the other Sunday morning. But Ukraine shot down all 26 drones used in those strikes and a majority of 40 cruise missiles. Meanwhile, Russia is claiming progress in northeastern Ukraine. It says its troops captured the village in the Luhansk region on Saturday. Moscow also threatening with a response after what it calls a barbaric sea drone strike on one of its oil tankers. But Ukraine is making it clear it only plans to scale up those attacks, and it's putting 6 Russian ports on notice that shipping in and out of them could be impacted by military operations. Neda Bashir is monitoring events for you. She joins us now live from London. Good morning, Neda. Escalating attacks just as this peace summit is underway in Saudi.
Absolutely. It's been another devastating night across Ukraine's eastern front lines. We've heard from the Ukrainian Air Force. They've described what was a large-scale aerial attack by the Russian armed forces using both drones and missiles across Ukraine's eastern region to devastating effect. Although Ukraine has said that it managed to thwart dozens of aerial attacks using its air defense systems. But of course, there has been devastation recorded as well. President Zelensky addressing this, he spoke about an attack in Kharkiv targeting a blood transfusion center. He says that a Russian guided aerial bomb targeted the center, setting it ablaze, and sadly fatalities have been confirmed amongst the wounded, although no official figures on that just yet. But Russia is also accusing Ukraine of its own round of attacks in the southeastern Donetsk region. They say that the Ukrainian armed forces targeted a university in Donetsk using what they claim to be cruise missiles as well as cluster munitions, though CNN has been unable to independently verify these claims. But this has been reported in Russian state media, and citing emergency services, they say that there were no people present inside the university at the time, but they say that the Donetsk region underwent several shelling attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces. They say they recorded 48 attacks in total. And of course, southeast in the Black Sea, tensions continue to bubble. We've seen those attacks by Ukrainian sea drones targeting Russian vessels. As you mentioned, Ukraine has said that these plans could step up. We could see continued attacks against Russian vessels using maritime drones there. We heard from the head of the Ukrainian security service, as well as official sources speaking to CNN, saying that as long as there are Russian forces in Ukrainian waters on Ukrainian land, these attacks will continue, and several Russian ports have been put on coastal alert. Officials saying that these are now conflict risk areas, but Russia is vowing its own response. We've heard from the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, who has said that these attacks will not go without a response. There will be retaliation, and those responsible will be punished. But of course, for Ukraine, this is a crucial element of their counteroffensive. They've described these sea drone attacks as a logical and effective step in this counteroffensive.
So basically what we're seeing here, Jim, is a missile that is, well, a drone that is acting kind of like a missile that is going toward a ship. And you can see the ship right there as it's, being approached by the drone. The drone is hitting it right on the side, basically in one of the more vulnerable points of the ship. So what this can do is really a lot of severe damage. It can actually take out a large portion of the ship. It can possibly sink it, depending on the amount of explosives. Now, in this particular case, they tell us that it was around 500 I think kilograms of TNT. So this is, a pretty massive explosion is possible with something like this. And I think what you're seeing is really something that allows us to, realize that the type of warfare that we're dealing with here is an asymmetric kind of warfare, and that's very different. Ukraine has no real practical navy at this particular point in time, except for these drones.
And while we're getting a pretty good shot, pretty good image of the Russian ship that it's approaching, I am assuming that it's essentially traveling under the cover of a lot of darkness here. That the ships aren't really seeing, even though we can see the drone in this video, the ships aren't seeing that thing coming.
They're not. And in fact, they don't have the capability. Ships have radar that is designed to protect them against other surface vessels. They also, in the case of a naval vessel, they have radars that protect them against aircraft. But there's very little protection in the way of anti-drone measures, and that really affects all the naval vessels in the world. That's something that is going to be a big game changer once we really assess how capable the Ukrainians actually have been in this particular case.
The Ukrainian Postal Service has issued a new stamp that calls on Western allies to provide the country with fighter jets. The design shows a Kremlin tower at the mercy of a cheese grater. Its holes are shaped like a US F-16 fighter jets. According to the Post Office, the stamp is intended to stress the urgent need for the jets from Western allies in order to defend against Russian attacks. Hundreds of people lined up to buy the stamp and the matching envelope in the capital on Friday. The Post Office says proceeds from the stamp will be used to send drones to Ukrainian forces.